Hello, my name's Andrew, and today we're doing a long-term review of the Xero Denver. So I've been wearing these for almost a year now, and they're my favorite shoes that Xero makes. They're also one of my favorite barefoot shoes, period, because they're really versatile. They've got some great durability, and I can use them for pretty much everything in a lot of different seasons. So we're gonna get to that, but yeah, let's just start by looking at the toe box. So I like these boots because they have a lot of width up front. I do think that one of the cons of them is that they get a little bit more tapered here, which I wish Xero had just kind of gone more straight with them. But there's a ton of room up top with the canvas. Some boots, like Vivo Barefoots, can get a little squashed on the top. They're a little bit thin, you know? So I think that the extra material up here kind of makes up for the little bit of sculpting on the front of the toe box. And it's also just like, has a lot of flex, the canvas version. They also have a leather. I've never gotten to try them because they always seem to be out of stock. I don't know why, but I really love the leather. It has like a nice natural kind of army type look to it. You can treat it with wax. I've never really needed to because I have other boots that are like fully waterproof that I would wear for going through really swampy conditions. So this has worked fine for me, just going through wet grass and just minor slush and stuff like that, but you could certainly treat it with wax if you wanted to. In terms of how it looks, I mean, everything is worn very well. It's a glued sole, but there's really no separation anywhere on the entire boot. So I'm really happy with that. The gluing looks good, the stitching looks good on the top as well. There's really nothing coming out anywhere. And I've put these boots through the ringer. You can see that they're kind of nasty on the bottom. They've got some cottonwood fluffies stuck in there. But yeah, like I said, the canvas is very rugged. It resists scrapes and tears from thorns and rocks and roots and stuff like that. There's a little bit of toe protection in the front, so I've never really stubbed my toe because you've got the rubber here, which is nice, but then you've got a little bit more toe protection up top, but it's not hard like some shoes, especially hiking boots are. So it doesn't bother the top of your feet, and the same goes for the canvas. Like I said, it just flexes with your foot. And then they've got some extra reinforcement here, which is nice, and the laces, plus the grommet eyelets, which, yeah, have held really well. They don't have as much grip, I find, as some other shoes, but this also makes them easier to take on and off because sometimes if you have eyelets that are a little bit tighter, you know, it helps you get a snugger fit, but then when you go to take them off, it's a bit more of a struggle. So I don't know, they're fine. Mostly I just loosen the top two eyelets, and then that's pretty much all that I need to do. The laces look really good as well. They're not coming apart anywhere. They're definitely durable. I think it's a synthetic material, but yeah, it's worn really well. The back of the boot is kind of nice too because they've got this extra layer that's stitched in the back, because the heel is one of the places where especially hiking boots can wear out. You've got a little bit of support here where this comes up, which is nice because it is just a canvas material. It doesn't have quite as much structure as like a leather hiking boot. So that feels really good as well, but it's not like bothering you. You know, it's not creating any pressure. One of the places where I can get pressure on hiking boots is like right here in the ankle, you know, because you've got that ankle bone and then it can create some rubbing, but that's not a problem in these boots. They feel really, really comfortable. You've got a pull tab, which, you know, is nice. And then on the inside of the boot, it's got a synthetic lining. This is one thing that I wish they would have changed. I wish they would have put in some kind of natural fabric like cotton, maybe, just to be a little bit more antimicrobial. You know, but it works fine. It feels nice. It's really, really soft. It almost feels like kind of like a wool alternative. It will get a little bit sweaty if you get up into like the 70s with these boots, but they're insulated and they're kind of meant for cooler temperatures. I've been down to 0 with these as long as I have a couple layers of Injinji merino wool toe socks to warm them up a bit. So they have a really good temperature range as long as you're not trying to use them for hot conditions. I actually wish that they'd make a version of the Denver that didn't have that insulation there, because I think that it would be really great for like hot summer hikes too. And then they've got kind of like a faux leather thing going on here, which is nice. It just creates a little bit of extra reinforcement and allows your foot to slip in. And I just think it looks cool. You know, it kind of looks leathery, but it's a great vegan option if you don't want to use animal products. And then in terms of the sole, it's got, I think it's around 5.5 to 6.5 millimeters. This is a mini rant that I've done before about Xero is that they oftentimes don't put the thickness of the shoe on their website, and it's like, how can you do that if you're a Barefoot brand? They've got like paragraphs and paragraphs of text, but they don't have the thickness of the sole. But anyways, I'm pretty sure it's about 5.5 to 6.5 because I have some Vivo Barefoots that are very similar. But anyways, it's kind of like a medium thick sole, so it has some really, really good flexibility, but it's also durable. And you can hear the rubber, you know, it's got some thickness to it, but there's some nice spacing in the tread. So they're close enough together that you can walk on roads. It feels really amazing walking on pavement. It doesn't feel clunky whatsoever like some hiking boots. But then it's also got a little bit of room in between the lugs, so it works well in muddy conditions too. It's not quite as aggressive as something that has more claw-like deep lugs, but yeah, there's definitely some depth there, as you can see. And as you bend the boot, they open up even more, and then they've got this chevron kind of triangle shape going on, so when you're going uphill, the triangles in the front will catch there, and then also the splits will catch a little bit as well, and they're also just meant to add some more flexibility to the boot, which is great. Like I said, really flexible boot, very agile. And then in the back, the chevron lugs are going in the opposite direction, so when you're going down a hill, they're gonna catch here and just give you a little more traction. And then they've also added some reinforcement to the heel in the back with a little bit more durable panels. And this is great for more rocky, rugged conditions because it helps the boot wear down. I mean, the tread looks fantastic on these. The only place where I have a little bit of wear is on the heel here. You can see just the texture, that very light texture is starting to come off there. And then on the forefoot, like right here, but otherwise the tread looks really fantastic for having had them for almost a year now and using them a lot during any of the cool seasons. So they've been great. These, I mean, are one of those hiking boots where you could just have these and nothing else. And as long as you're not living in a super hot climate where you need something like this all the time, like if you had these and maybe a pair of sandals for the summer, it could get you through pretty much anything. In terms of alternatives, this is the Vivo Barefoot Magna FG. It's a really similar type of mid-weight hiking boot. It's got a mid-cut as well, so a little bit more protection from water splashing up or if you're using them for cooler temperatures. But the toe box is also wide like Xero, but like I said, it's a little bit more squared off here, which I like. It just gives you a tiny bit more room for someone that has a little more splay. They're not gonna fit someone with extra wide feet, unfortunately, like the Xeros, but pretty much any other foot shape they'll work for. They do have a little bit more structure and protection to them because they've got a thicker leather upper versus the canvas for Xero. So they're a little bit more waterproof, which is nice. They've got these lugs here, and like I said, versus Xero, which is a little bit more open, these grip just a little bit better, so you get a little bit, like, if you tighten them here, it's just gonna stay when you loosen laces at the top, but honestly, it doesn't really matter because this is a slip-on shoe, which is one advantage that it has over the Xero Denver, and so basically, I just get the laces where I want it, I tie them, and I've never touched them again, never even had to untie them or tie them. And then you've got two pull tabs here on the front and the back, so it's really easy to just slip in. It's got this really stretchy wool blend upper on the top, and it has like a rib design. So this creates a little bit of padding around your ankle, which is nice, and padding in the front where the laces are. But it also creates a little bit more airflow just because the padding opens up some channels for air to come through. And that's important because this boot will work a little bit better in hotter conditions versus the Xero Denver. It doesn't have quite as much insulation. It's a little bit more minimal. So it does have a wool blend collar, which is nice for keeping some cold out in the winter. And again, I've worn these down to Xero. As long as I have a pair of Injinjis and maybe even a wool felt insole, you can do pretty much whatever you want in terms of getting down into really cold temperatures. One thing I don't like about this boot is the strap here, because even though it's fairly soft, I do find that it creates a little bit of a pressure point, so wearing a couple layers of socks can help for some padding, but as I've worn the boot, it hasn't become, or actually it's become less of an issue because it's leather and it does loosen up a bit, but it is something that I notice if I'm just wearing a single layer of socks. Kind of like the Denver, you've got reinforcement around the back, which is great, and also like the Denver, I don't have any problems with the glue here. It all looks really good. It stayed on despite using these a lot in multiple seasons, in spring, fall. and even some cool days in summer. I also used it as a work boot recently when I was working on my van because I needed something that was breathable and I was doing like cutting metal. So it provided some protection, which is great, but then the top was a little bit more breathable and, you know, they'll get sweaty. It was like 80 degrees inside the van and my feet were definitely sweating, but it was less so than I would have had in something like Denver where you've got full insulation and a little bit more padding versus the minimal type breathable upper on the Magna, which is really nice. In terms of the sole, it's slightly thinner. It's got a 5.5 millimeter sole, so medium thick, some really good flexibility. Similar to the Denver, it's got one of those treads where it works well on roads. It feels really great just, you know, running on errands in cooler weather in the grocery store, but also just kind of any type of firm ground trail you could go on. It's got enough resistance for that. But then also, you know, a decent amount of spacing for some wetter conditions. In the back, the lugs are a little closer together to provide some protection from rocks and to prevent the sole from wearing down too fast. If you're going on like steep, muddy hills, the firm ground tread is not going to perform quite as well or give you as much grip as something more aggressive, like I was talking about. But yeah, in general, I think this is Vivo Barefoot's most versatile tread, unless you're living in like jungle, muddy type conditions where it's just wet and slippery all the time. I really like the water resistance on it. I mean, if you went through a puddle, obviously this part's going to get wet and on the top as well, but wet grass, you know, light puddles that aren't too deep, like it can handle pretty much anything that you would do for normal hiking or casual use. Then we got the Sutage Fento, which is another leather barefoot hiking boot, and also has a wide toe box, again, kind of squared off like Vivo, which I like. I find that it's a little bit more shallow in terms of depth. If you have a higher instep, this is probably not the shoe for you. Or if you're planning on layering multiple socks, it can get a little bit snug in there. But the great thing about these shoes is that you don't really need a lot of insulation because they actually have a waterproof lining. They don't specifically say that they're waterproof, but they feel waterproof to me. I've been through some pretty deep streams, and the tongue is also semi-gusseted. You can see that it kind of wraps around in there, so this really helps with the waterproofing going through higher wet grass and deeper puddles, things like that. But in terms of the toe protection, it's fairly minimal. I've found that it prevents me from stubbing my toe on, you know, rocks and roots and stuff like that. It works fine. You've got some thicker rubber that comes along the front. The only thing that I'll say is this is really the only spot where these boots have worn, just right up at the tip there. So I don't know, maybe if they extended just a little sliver of that rubber over here, that could help. But overall, again, the boots have worn well. They haven't come out or come unattached from the sole anywhere. It's also a glued sole. And probably part of that is because you've got the waterproof lining inside there. So I think everything is kind of glued together, which helps hold the boot in place. The laces are kind of similar to the Denver in that they slide really easily, so it's a really easy boot to take on and off. You just like pull once, or you know, whether you're putting them on and off. Has a nice big pull tab in the back, so they're easy to slip on, especially with this long tongue. It's like the whole boot opens way up when you undo the laces, which is great. It's almost like a slip-on shoe, even though it's not technically a slip-on shoe. In terms of the sole, it's 3.5 millimeters, so a very, very thin sole. Has some good flexibility, a little bit less than the other two. You can see that it's got some structure to it as well. And even though it's super thin, it actually feels similar to the other boots in terms of protection, because you can hear it's got a lot of durability to it. And this is the most interesting tread I've ever seen for a barefoot shoe. It's got this kind of like crosshatch design, which it works surprisingly well. For a boot that is this thin, it actually gives you a pretty good amount of traction on wet, slippery hills, as long as they're not too steep. But it's great on roads, it's great on rocks and stuff like that. So overall, it's an interesting sole. I've never seen a company do this before, but overall, it's a great shoe for when it's really cold and slushy and you need something that has extremely high water resistance, but you don't want something super clunky. Finally, we've got the Freet Muddy Leather, and this is the most extreme out of the ones we've looked at. It's got a nice wide toe box, a little more squared off design, which is great. And then the leather is recycled, so it has a bit more of a uniform look, but it's very durable. It has high water resistance. The laces hold really well on these grommets here, and then it's got 2 quick laces at the top, which makes it easier to take on and off. Inside the boot, it's got a water resistant lining, so it's great for colder weather and really sloppy conditions. The back of the boot is slanted down, which is great because it allows your ankle a little bit more movement, even though the boot is taller. In terms of the sole, it's 7.5 millimeters, so it's got some good vertical flex and not quite as much horizontally. This is definitely the most protective out of the boots, like I talked about. It's got these really beefy lugs, so if you're going on larger rocks, you know, really steep hills, backpacking, that sort of thing, this is a great tread for that. It's nice because the lugs are wider, so they can work on pavement, they can work on flat boulders, they can handle any kind of sharp rocks, but they've also got some space in between them, so they have good grip on wet, slippery hills as well. They're even closer in the back. This is really a Tyrannosaurus Rex of a barefoot boot. But like I said, not quite as much flexibility, so I think if you need something for more casual walks, this is gonna feel like overkill, but for anything extreme, it's got you covered. All right, so that's my long-term review of the Xero Denver and Friends, but if you'd like to support the channel, you can shop with the referral links down below, browse and filter more products with the shoe finder tool at my website barefootwear.org, or watch my Xero drop transition video to learn more about barefooting. Finally, if you have a question about the Xero Denver or about barefoot hiking boots in general, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Peace.